And you can see this with this cartoon, that from the early primate to the early Homo sapiens, where we were able to spark a fire, domesticate the dog and the bovine, the red meat, build spears, think about how to plant crops, develop agriculture, and more recently, we've changed the way we eat. Let's start with the early ancestor to Homo sapiens. That person's diet could be characterized by feast and famine. You found food, you gorged yourself. You had to have the genes, however, to deal with all of that insulin-inducing food because you didn't know when you were going to eat your next meal. Secondly, you could eat meal only within walking distance. And in fact, many times our ancestors expended more calories looking for food than they were able to extract out of the food once they found it. They ate only seasonal foods. And they ate foods that were vegetables, fruits, high fibers, and some aquatic foods, mollusks, turtles, and so forth. But in general, their diet was of low calories. Today's diet is exemplified by this figure here. We are not calorically restricted anymore. Today, we have doctors, nurses, firemen, policemen working at night. Well, our genes had designed our brain to make a powerful antioxidant hormone, melatonin, to help ameliorate the toxic effects of eating the foods. So when we are working at night, we are not protecting ourselves with a gene that was designed to protect ourselves. Now look at the other thing that the modern diet has done probably within the last 50, 60 years. And that is we're eating more processed foods, more red meat. Here you have a bun that's probably refined wheat where the fiber has been taken out, many of the nutrients, the minerals, and the vitamins are gone. Then you look at the beef itself, it's been pyrolyzed, burned. Whenever you burn plant or animal protein, such as the tobacco leaf in the cigar, or that hamburger, you're making carcinogens, such as the polyaromatic hydrocarbons. And that thing that looks like cheese, if you go to the store and look at the box, you'll see food flavorings, food colors, about 25 different chemicals that even the chemists can't pronounce. And you ask yourself, where's the cheese? All right, we're eating processed foods today. And the French fries there, they've been prepared in hot oils, and we now know that, in fact, another carcinogen is produced, acrylamide. And who knows what's in that lettuce and the French fries, the fried onions. We do know there's too many calories and not enough vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients. Let's be more scientific now about this. This chart right in the middle is taken from the International Agency for Research on Cancer in Lyon, France. Over the last 50 years, up on top, you see colon cancer frequencies that are found in the countries that produce the red meat, United States, Canada, Australia, You could even put Argentina up there. And you'll note, however, that the American colon cancer rate in recent years is going down. We're eating less red meat and more sushi, perhaps. But look at Japan. Before the Second World War, the Japanese had what the nutritionists tell us today was one of the best diets on earth. The rice, the vegetables, the tofu, the raw fish, and green tea. But now they're switching to the American diet. And the same is with Korea. After the Korean War, they were poor in South Korea. They didn't have much meat. They had a lot of kimchi, right? But in the foxholes, with their American soldiers, the American soldiers were fed high-caloric Spam. They didn't like it. They gave it to their Korean brethren, and it turns out the Koreans got hooked on it. I've been told that 5 million cans a week are sent to Korea today. They love it, all right? And now everybody hears about Korean beef because they can import. It's an economic powerhouse, just like Japan was 40 years ago, or 25 years ago. And the colon cancer frequency is skyrocketing in Korea. But down on the bottom, India, primarily a Hindu nation and the home of the sacred cow, up until recently, they didn't eat red meat. But if you saw the movie Slumdog Millionaire, you know, India is becoming an economic powerhouse, and you can see there's a tendency now of colon cancer on the increase there. And visually, these are pictures I took because I lived and worked on the atomic bomb survivors in Hiroshima, Japan. This is a woman, 104 years old, and about that time, about 70, 80 years ago, Japanese women were small stature. They didn't have breast cancer. They didn't have hypertension. They didn't have strokes. And this woman was about this tall. Her granddaughters were not giants. I was taller than this young woman, and I'm not tall. So that just shows you how small she was. But she contributed to the longest median lifespan on Earth, eating the typical Japanese diet. On the other hand, this is a woman today in Japan. She will never contribute to the next median lifespan on Earth, the longest one. And her children will probably end up being baby sumo wrestlers or maybe tackles for Michigan State football team. The point being is the transition of their diet. Now, I'm going to have to end quickly with the point I want to make with this collision between biological and cultural evolution. David Barker was an epidemiologist in England, and he noticed in studying very severe chronic diseases in London that it appeared that all of those people who had heart attacks and strokes and cancer seemed to have had mothers who were put in terrible, terrible environments, which is to say their embryo and fetuses were in bad environments. And I'm going to end basically with one illustration again. Again, with my work on the atomic bomb survivors in Japan. About a couple of years ago, Time magazine came out with a cover, Why Breast Cancer is Spreading Around the World. And you read that article, you were under the impression that adult young women who were contributing to this epidemic of breast cancer were exposed to all these pollutants out there, DDT and what have you. About the same time, the scientific article in Endocrine had on its cover the question, does breast cancer start in the womb? It was an article designed to bring the Barker hypothesis to the attention of scientists, asking the question, is the embryo and fetus the sensitive stage of human life whereby chronic diseases later in life actually get triggered? And then about a year and a half ago, my wife and I, celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary in Buenos Aires, I walked past the kiosk and saw a Time magazine again, and it has on its cover how the first 9 months shape the rest of your life. Now bringing to the public, the lay public's attention, the Barker hypothesis. Now, it's very clear that diet, especially for young children or the developing fetus, is extremely critical. So I'm going to end with the moral implications of medicine, scientific and clinical. It turns out, you all know globally today, probably 95% of the limited healthcare resources are put for crisis medicine. You have a stroke, you have a heart attack, you have cancer, you break a bone, you have a gunshot wound, you go to the hospital, you got to deal with the symptoms immediately. Only less than 5% of the scarce global healthcare resources are devoted to prevention. And here is my moral take on this. It turns out, again, that world we're living in today of 7 billion people will be, by the end of the century, inhabited by 2 billion more babies. They have no choice of the genes they're going to inherit. That means probably 10% of the 20,000 genes we have will lead to a genetic predisposition to some disease. But it also means 90% of any potential disease that that child might have could be influenced really significantly during development. We must do more to educate all young women around the world who will be mothers to those 2 billion new babies to have better nutrition. By the same token, that means politically, all around the world, institutionalized efforts have to be made to provide these young women with better nutrition, access to better nutrition. I end with this quotation of the ancient proverb, when diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. When diet is correct, medicine is of no need.